rooms have access to that as you need to. Just be mindful of the door is pretty loud, so just shut it quietly. There's some light refreshments, and please be sure to sign in if you haven't already. And those on the virtual side, we'll have a log that's kicked out, so we'll know how many have attended. And I think we're in process for those in the room, that those 2 screens, TVs, we're in process of getting this screen up here transferred to that. That will happen only about 15 minutes. We'll be able to carry that forward. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started.
Sure, that sounds good to me.
All right. So here we have the agenda. We're going to first walk through ground rules. So I kind of already started.
Somebody calling you.
Yeah. And so this is I put a reminder out there. This meeting will be recorded, being recorded. I will probably mention this many times. Those in the room and in virtual side of things, stay muted. Your phone, all that audio is, we have to work with these mics in the room, but we don't have a way to broadcast our presentation here to the back of the room. So if folks in the back are chit-chatting, be mindful of those next to you, because they might not hear what I'm saying, or Tucker or other staff. And everyone online, just stay muted, or we will mute you, and we will get to public comments in due time. So with that, when we get to public comments, we'll ask that you raise your hand, type, or speak your name to be added to the speaking list. We will rotate between in-person and virtual to provide some time, equal opportunity, but also time to allow folks in the room to come up, sit at this front table, and also get our speaking list built on the virtual side. The only comments in the room can be had with a microphone. So if you need some assistance with us to bring you a microphone, let us know. Otherwise, we will request everyone to come up. And remember that the most effective comments are the topics that we are discussing today. Staff may choose and to close public comment, to stay on schedule, and or to move on to other individuals that we've not heard from yet. From the virtual meeting side, the reminder, you can mute by using *6 to mute, unmute, or the actual mute button. And we will not use chat for commenting except to assist with technical assistance or your raise hand function, and we will not be using the chat for public comment. We will, again, a reminder, focus on the agenda and the topics at hand. Be respectful of everyone. For the 3rd time, reminder, mute your line. Identify yourself when you speak so we know who is speaking, because there's some new faces. We haven't seen each other in a few years for some of us, and we want it on record what the comments are and who stated them. It's fair to be tough on issues and questions, but not on people. It's not acceptable to have any attacks, insults, or threats. We ask that you listen, speak and act professionally. No offensive, disrespectful, or derogatory language, including profanity, will be tolerated. It will not be tolerated. And we request that you allow for a balance of speaking times, to try to be concise, to the point, and limit the number of times you come up so we can get through everyone. And if there's more time, we'll circle back through with follow-ups as well. Not on here, but don't expect every question to be answered. We will address what we need to and staff feels is appropriate. Additionally, comments can be provided online at the link provided in the agenda, and we will share that with our Oregon staff once we've collected comments through the North of Falcon process. Anything else on ground rules, Tucker?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. So back to the agenda. We're going to do a super fast staff introductions, but we're not going to go around the entire room. Just those who are up front. So for the record, I am Ryan Lothrop, Columbia River Fishery Manager with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. We'll go to my right, then my left afterwards.
Quentin Doherty, WDFW, Columbia River Management Unit, fish biologist.
And then Mertice Dobler is helping with our running the meeting. So she's back there setting up the back screen.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kelly Cunningham, I'm the Director of Fish Department. Kyle Alex, Intergovernmental Center Manager for WDFW.
And to my left.
I am Tucker Jones, Oregon Fish and Wildlife Columbia River Program Manager.
I am Jimmy Watts, Oregon Fish and Wildlife, Columbia River Recreational Fisheries, and acting Columbia River Fisheries Assistant Manager.
And we have two staff on the line that I'd like to call on to introduce themselves, Charlene and Jeff.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Charlene Hurst. I'm the Columbia River Management Unit lead. And just a quick note that it was hard to hear Kelly and Kyle. And at one point earlier, Ryan, your volume really dropped down for those of us on the call. So just for awareness. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Whistler. I'm the Columbia River Fisheries Manager for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife.
All right, thank you. So with that, I'm going to just go through the meeting materials, which we'll be going through, but also want to scroll to future meetings. Bottom of the agenda, our upcoming meetings through the rest of the North of Falcon process. From here on out, I guess the conclusionary point is the final ocean fisheries and the outcome of Columbia River fisheries will kind of be wrapped up during the Pacific Fishery Management Council week, April 2nd to the 7th, which is down in.
At this time, the steering team is marked in.
Please go on mute. Thank you. So moving back to the agenda, just a quick run through. Going to do a real fast walkthrough of last year, just kind of overview where information is available. And bottom line, ESA exploitation rates on fisheries, kind of the final piece of completing last year. And then we will shift to this year, the constraints, the conservation objectives, forecasts, and policy guidance, the modeling assumptions for this year. We'll walk through the ocean fishery alternatives and then the Columbia River. And then once that's over, and we walk that front end, then we'll open it up to questions on kind of last year, this year, overview of what we provided. And then from there, we'll take a break, and then we will dive right into the recreational fishery discussion. For the main stem, we'll have walk through that material, and then there is an additional handout for the 5 Washington tributary proposals as well. And then I think that's where we'll have the majority of the time remaining to take comments, questions, etc. For the duration of this meeting. So there should be sufficient time for questions, comments, etc. And we'll work through that both virtually and in person. And at the conclusion, we will narrow down to one strategy to take the April council meeting, adjust the fisheries accordingly to achieve our conservation and policy objectives, while also the fundamental new piece you'll be hearing today is to reduce in-season closure risk on our Columbia River recreational fisheries. And there are some links provided for where fisheries and the regulation will be posted when available. Anything else on the agenda from Tucker or staff?
No. I guess I would say that we're not going to keep people here if and the doors aren't locked, so we're not going to trap you here until 5. But there is going to be a hard stop at 5. I at least have to leave at that time. So.
Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to switch over to our main handout. So just give me 1 second.
Ryan, is there a way to get just a little bit more volume? Like Tucker's is good, but just for you.
Thought I was the soft talker.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to walk through the front end of the package that we've provided. So starting off with last year's information, we do have in the text provided there, that is the background information of detailed stock and status and management guidelines for Columbia River fisheries. Most recent reports have been provided online, and the 2023 fall report will be available in late July. That's where you can look at preseason plans, postseason model runs, final catch estimates, ESA impacts. Those are all provided there. Additionally, we did provide and post on the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's website for the Recreational Advisory Group some supplemental information. You can go to there for pre-post models for the fall Chinook, summer Chinook, and coho. So just some background information wanted to kind of point individuals to if there's more questions, but we do provide quite a bit of information in those reports, and they are publicly available. So moving through last year, quick summary. Last year's preseason forecast on summer Chinook was 56,000, and we saw a run came in quite a bit above at around 78,500. For sockeye, we had a forecast of just under 200,000 and had a record return of 660, almost 5,000 sockeye. For upriver bright and Snake River wild components, we saw an increase in abundance in both. The upriver bright run size translated into the final return was just shy of 255,000 fish. And the Snake River wild, that is the ESA listed component of the upriver bright run. That return came in above forecast at just shy of 19,000. The total non-treaty allowable for last year was 15% harvest rate. Our estimates put us at 12.9%, so below that 15% limit. For lower river Columbia Tule fall Chinook stock, we saw an increase in, it kind of straddles 2 pages, in abundance of about 87,500 fish, of which a component of that, the Bonneville hatchery Tule comprised a large component of that return. We did in river, our final estimate is in the Columbia River exploitation rate at 7.85% or 80% of our preseason plan. For Columbia River coho, we had a return last year of ocean abundance prior to fisheries of 685,200, which is below the forecast. Of note, in river, the in-river actual returns at Columbia River mouth, the run size was 540,000, which is also below forecast. The final exploitation rate on the Lower Columbia Natural ESA component of that stock was 11.7%, so below the ESA limit, of which the river's portion was 1.4% exploitation rate, and that does include buoy 10. For upriver summer steelhead, we saw last year's return of just shy of 117,000 A and B index steelhead, of which we saw an increased return compared to forecast of the B component, and the wild B return was 6,700 fish. Our preliminary estimates for both wild A and wild B put us below 1% of the allowed 2% per stock. So then I'm not going to walk through the next portion here. This is just a quick summary of the preseason and actual recreational and commercial fisheries in the Columbia River. This information has been provided online through since December and has been publicly available, but there is information in there we wanted to provide in case you wanted to look at some details. So I'm going to stop there and check in with staff on last year's review. Is anything else we wanted to highlight?
No, I mean, there's a significant amount of information in the packet. There's more available online on posted materials for anybody who really wants to dig in and take a look. Just felt like our time would be better served today, focusing on 2023 rather than covering all that in fine detail. So, thanks.
And I guess just as a key note, just we went over that pretty fast, but from a ESA conservation objective, all of our fisheries were below the limits collectively. So that is just wanted to make that note heard. So now I'm going to pivot into this year's fisheries and the forecast conservation objectives and policy guidance. First off, there's some guidelines and objectives that we have to abide by in setting fisheries. First of all is the Endangered Species Act, and we have various components of our Columbia River Run that are protected and listed. Annually, we do receive the NMFS, the NOAA guidance letter for the, which was provided. That's the salmon guidance letter to the Pacific Fishery Management Council that provides an overarching set of objectives to set fisheries in the ocean and corresponding terminal areas such as the Columbia River. Make note that NMFS staff, Jeremy Jordan, is present if any questions on that guidance letter do come up when we get to public comments. But with that, we're going to keep moving forward. We do have the U.S. v. Oregon management agreements. That's the Columbia River element of sharing agreement, ESA coverage, the associated biological opinion for the treaty and non-treaty fisheries that provides guidance on setting our fisheries and allowable harvest rates. And then I'm going to walk through this briefly here. We have the states of Oregon and Washington policy guidance that we have to take into consideration when creating and crafting fisheries and managing fisheries. So starting off with summer Chinook, the harvestable allocation for fisheries downstream of Priest Rapids Dam between commercial and recreational is not concurrent between the states. Oregon has allocates 80% recreational, 20% commercial, while Washington is 70-30. Therefore, staff is modeling 70% recreational, 20% commercial, and 10% unallocated for downstream of Priest Rapids Dam. Additionally, policy guidance on commercial gears is not concurrent. Oregon does not allow the use of gill nets in the summer, while Washington does. And due to non-concurrence on gill nets being permissible in the main stem, no other gears being readily available, no main stem commercial fishery in the summer is expected to occur. For sockeye, much like summer Chinook on the allocation, we are non-concurrent. Oregon rule allocates 80% recreational, 20% commercial, while Washington is 70-30. Therefore, modeling is 70% recreational, 20% commercial, and 10% unallocated. For fall Chinook guidance, we are concurrent between the two states. It is listed as no more than 70% of the allowable ESA impacts of the most constraining fall Chinook stock are for the recreational fishery and no less than 30% to the commercial. Policy guidance for gill nets to be used in the main stem zones 4 and 5 is concurrent. And Oregon limits the impacts for lower river alternative gear to 2 percentage points of the commercial allocation. And fall Chinook recreational fishery season objectives are not concurrent. Oregon has guidance on recreational fishery Chinook retention seasons, while Washington does not. For this year, Oregon recreational fall Chinook retention season objectives are not expected to be achieved due to the fishery constraints. For coho, The ESA impacts for the coho stock is prioritized by fishery segments, and we are between the two states. We are largely concurrent, but that allocation is not numerical. It's prioritized by fishery. And then lastly, on coho, policy guidance regarding allowable commercial gears is not concurrent. Oregon rules do not allow the use of gill nets in zones 1 through 3, while Washington policy does. And due to non-concurrence, no main stem gill net fishery in zones 1 through 3 is expected to occur. However, coho directed fishery using tangle net gear and live capture techniques is expected to occur. Additionally, there is the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife Colville Tribal Upper Columbia Management Agreement that pertains to sharing of Upper Columbia summer snook and sockeye that we have to take note of. So now I'm going to move on into the actual fishery components. For the Upper Columbia summer snook, we have a forecast of 84,800, and I already referenced the modeling and sharing between the recreational commercial share for downstream Priest Rapids. It'll be 70% rec and 20% commercial. The forecast should provide for recreational fishing opportunities in all areas, and the run size is not typically able to be updated until around July 1st. For sockeye, the forecast is 234,500 and is below the 10-year average, and the forecast is expected to achieve the Wenatchee escapement goal, which is 23,000. So coming in above the escapement goal forecast. The ESA component for the sockeye run is the Snake River stock, which allows a 1% total use, 1% use of non-treaty fisheries, which equates to 2,345 fish for fisheries downstream of Highway 395. Moving on to steelhead, this year's forecast is 67,800 Skamania A and B index stock steelhead. The A index component is 55,400, of which 17,300 are wild, and B is 8,000, of which 1,300 is wild. The allowable impact rate on both wild A and wild B components is 2% during the fall non-treaty fisheries. And this is a very low forecast, and given the poor expected return of upriver summer steelhead fishery restrictions will be similar to what we've seen in the last several years as we've continued the poor returns since 2017. Moving on to Lower Columbia River Tule Fall Chinook. The preliminary forecast is 77,100, which puts us in the 38% exploitation rate limit share between ocean fisheries and the Columbia River. This is expected to be the most constrained fall Chinook stock in 2023, particularly for the recreational fisheries, and no more than 70% of the allowable ESA impacts of the most constrained fall Chinook stock, which is this stock, the Lower River Tule stock to the recreational fishery sector, and then no less than 30% to the commercial. For upriver Bright run, the forecast is 272,000 fish and 13,300 Snake River wild. That puts us in the allowable harvest rate of 15%. So this table on the top of page 7 shows the different components of the fall Chinook aggregate runs. Looks like some of the lines didn't carry over for some reason, so I apologize for that, separating the stocks. That being said, it's a mixed bag of some stocks having a higher forecast than last year's actual return and some lower. I guess of note, we have a lower river hatchery return than last year's actual returns. The Bonneville Pool hatchery return is below last year's record return, but is still a good forecast. And lastly, the upriver Bright component is above last year's return of 254,000. So the upriver Bright is 272,000, and pool upriver Brights are down. That puts us at an aggregate forecast below last year's return, but above last year's actual forecast. And then for coho, The abundance, the forecast pre-fisheries is 866,000. And that puts us, and looking and using the LCN coho matrix for harvest, that is provides allowable sharing in the ocean and river at 23%. And then within the USV Oregon Management Agreement, there is an obligation to have 50% of the upriver coho ocean abundance past Bonneville Dam. So before I move on to the next section, I want to check in with staff if there's anything else to that I may have glanced over or missed.
I don't think I had anything else that I noted, Brian. Thank you.
All right, hearing none, we're going to move into 2023 modeling assumptions and considerations. So we'll first start with the ocean fishery alternatives. So I will get that up on the screen, and Kyle, you might have to speak to that. Mike, a bit more reach, or you might have to slide over.
So is this one to the live stream and that's to the room? They're all both. So thanks, Ryan. Again, if you couldn't hear me online, I'm Kyle Eddix. I'm the Intergovernmental Salmon Manager for WDFW. I also represent WDFW on the Pacific Fishery Management Council for salmon issues. As I think people are aware, the council met the first full week in March to set the alternatives for salmon fisheries off the west coast of the southern U.S. for 2023. And out of that meeting come 3 alternatives. In the meeting packet for today, starting on what's page 35 in the electronic document, are the alternatives for north of Falcon ocean fisheries, those fisheries north of Cape Falcon, Oregon. The full alternatives for the coast are available along with what we call the preseason 2 document from the council that has modeling details on the fishery impacts for the fisheries coast-wide. I should note for Washington waters, those are the new ocean alternatives coupled with inside fisheries for Puget Sound, for coastal marine and freshwater, and the Columbia River. I'm not going to go through these in terrible detail. I'll just speak a little bit to fisheries south of Cape Falcon. Those are really being driven this year by low abundance of Sacramento Fall and Klamath Fall Chinook. So the south of Falcon alternatives represent significant reductions to closures for fisheries off the coast of California and Oregon. For north of Falcon, right here at the top of this page Ryan has up on the screen, you can see the non-treaty quota levels in the 3 alternatives. And those are in alternative 1, 85,000 Chinook and 200,000 marked coho. In alternative 2, 75,000 Chinook and 185,000 marked coho. And alternative 3, 65,000 Chinook and 170,000 marked coho. If you look through the details, those quotas are all broken out according to the council's Pacific Coast Fishery Management Plan. It spells out the allocations between the troll and recreational fisheries north of Falcon, as well as allocations between the sub areas off the coast of Washington. There have been some years in the recent past where, due to low coho abundances, we've deviated from that plan using emergency rules, but this year's fisheries are laid out according to that plan. I won't go into a whole lot of detail. You can see the troll alternatives in the first couple of pages and the recreational alternatives after that. In general, the alternative 1 with the higher quotas are the most liberal seasons. And as you move towards alternative 3 and the lower quotas, those are more restricted seasons when you look at opening and closing dates and bag limits and such. The council e-portal is open to take comments on the alternatives. It'll be open through 5 o'clock on March 30th. And if you go through the council website, agenda item E2 for the April council meeting is the most appropriate place for making comments to address those alternatives. And all of those comments are made available to all of the council members as we move into the April council meeting. The WDFW website is also up taking comments on recreational and commercial fisheries. So feel free to make comments there. We'll see those as well. Just ask you to be very specific as you make those comments on which fishery you're commenting on. It gets easy with comments coming around for fisheries all around the state. It can get tough to sort them all out but so be specific that you're speaking to ocean fisheries and which one you're commenting on. There'll also be public testimony taken during the April council meeting. It starts on April 2nd in Foster City, California, with the council making final management recommendations on April 6th. And the council does have hybrid comment options. So you can be there in person in California, but there are options to sign up and comment online as the council moves through its salmon agenda for the week. I think that's all I really wanted to cover, Ryan. So we can move through. We can circle back for questions on this later, however you want to go forward.
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, we'll come back when we get to the comment portion of this portion of the meeting. That will be coming up shortly. So just have one more section to cover. And sorry for those in the room. I don't know why this screen is blurry. It's worked wonderfully up until this morning. So try to make it as big as possible. But hopefully it's coming in clear for those virtually. Yeah, so it's just this projector. So apologize for that. So moving on to Columbia River. Basically, so starting with Upriver Bright, Snake River Wild, kind of already mentioned, we have an allowable harvest rate threshold given we're above those abundances at 15%. The Upriver Bright and Snake River Wild could become a limiter if catches and stock information are different than preseason expectations. So we just want to make that note. Things do change on us. For example, last year in October, the Upriver Bright Run, given stock composition shift with abundance, it became a constraint late in the season. We had to pull back on Chinook retention. So that's just one example of it changing on us in season. For the Lower River hatchery component, already made mention, we have a allowable rate of exploitation rate of 38% shared between the river and ocean fisheries, which also does include fisheries north of the U.S. border at Washington, up in Canada, and in the Southeast Alaska. Want to make note that this year's northern fishery abundances and fishery harvest estimates are typically updated by late March before we go into the April council meeting, and those will have to be reflected and addressed accordingly within the modeling at the council meeting. So our exploitation rate limits that we're going to show today, nothing else changing, would change come April council regardless, because those are last year's fisheries included in the modeling. So as I made mention, the Lower River hatchery tule is a key constrained stock for our fishery planning this year. Expect there to be a balanced sharing approach between ocean and in-river fisheries may need to be considered to achieve our conservation objectives as we go into the final phases of this year's North Falcon council process. The output of the March council meeting, these three alternatives that Kyle just walked through incorporate what he laid out. I just wanted to throw the numbers. So the high alternative, high ocean alternative, has an exploitation rate of the tule stock at 39.1%. So that is above the 38% limit, which includes a 9.7% in-river exploitation rate. The middle alternative puts us just shy of the 38% limits at 37.7%. And an in-river exploitation rate of 9.9% and low rate at 36.4 for tules, with an in-river component at 10.1. For coho, the high alternative and the limit was 23%. So we are under that in all alternatives. So 18.5%, 16.7, and 15.5, of which the river portion ranges from 3.6 to 4.6%. So kind of wrapping up this front end of this first section, the next in river modeling steps for this year. Obviously, lower river hatchery tules are a constraint. The allocation is no less than 30% for commercial fisheries, no more than 70% recreational. Modeling fall commercial fisheries is based on industry input and policy guidance, and we expect the 2023 fishing plan to be similar to the 2022 preseason planned fisheries. Discussion of the recreational fishery concepts will largely be had in the next section of this meeting, but we will meet the conservation objectives and abide by the policy guidance. The attempt here is we will work to get together and provide a meaningful fishery opportunity, but we do a couple key notes. The season objectives under the Oregon policy are not expected to be achieved. I mentioned that earlier. We have a variety of scenarios that staff model to limit the lower river tule mortalities in the fishery, to provide a path to substantially reduced in-season risk of closures. And there, any additional opportunities may exist in season with more upriver bright directed harvest opportunity, but that would be an in-season call. We are incorporating Chinook mortalities to create coho directed fisheries at buoy 10, as well, actually, we'll get to that later, but as well as October onward for the lower river fisheries. And steelhead modeling is not complete, but both recreational and commercial fisheries are expected to be well within the allowable ESA impact rates, given we expect similar restrictions to last year. So that's the front end of this packet, and just check in with staff if there's anything else to add.
No, I guess one thing I would stress is that we're hoping to set up 2023 fisheries that, as Ryan said, that might look similar to the 2022 pre-planned, but not the 2022 actual. So that's what we're really trying to work towards here. You know, as managers, we are actively trying to optimize these fisheries within our conservation constraints so that they can be, you know, a contributor to, you know, the conservation and recovery of these stocks and not the other way. And we are trying different things every year. We're going to keep trying to find that sweet spot. Hopefully it can be located. So
thank you, Tucker.
So I would say I think it is a little different, you know, this year, especially given sort of staffing constraints that have been going around. You know, I don't think that staff typically have been able to bring this many different scenarios for folks to look at it. And again, these are sort of, people should think of these conceptually, right? Not absolute, because we don't really know what we'll wind up with in river until that second north of Falcon meeting. And so the idea is have our concept of the general approach we want to take and then dial it in when we get those actual numbers in hand. So, yeah, I think that's about what I had to say on that.
Thanks.
And I do want to say also, I may have to step out for a moment for another call. So that it's not because I don't like you guys, it's just because I'm popular. So, all right.
All right. So with that, we are entering the first opportunity for questions, comments, thoughts on what you've heard so far. I just want to make a point. We're trying to save this year's recreational fishing structure discussion. So the concepts that Tucker alluded to after the next time, section that staff gets through the remainder of the report. So this is an opportunity to kind of do a high level, is there a question, clarification on what you were just presented on from staff? So we want to take those questions. So I'm just going to walk through this. Give me a minute and I'll get everyone kind of lined up for this. So we're going to alternate comments, questions from online to in person. And just remember, there is another opportunity later on within the recreational breakout. But so far we're on schedule, so that's a good thing. Create plenty of time for that, the commenting piece. And secondly, for those in the room, you will have to come up to the desk. If you need us to bring a mic back to you, just let us know. We'll work with you on that. But we ask that you come up and sit down. It's a little easier probably for me. If we'll kind of, two people can come to the front as long as someone just waits till their turn. And then, but there are some side chairs if you want to, kind of stage to come on up and be ready to jump in the hot seat, so to speak, the hot mic. But at the same point, we're going to be at the same time navigating and looking for hands on the virtual side. And there is, for those individuals who called in, your only way to let us know your name when we ask for it is to speak your name, and we'll add you to the list. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a list, and we'll get started and kind of check in on the list and keep going. Yeah, so it would take *6 to unmute if you're on your phone. So bear with us. We'll get through this, I promise. It's new for us too, so we're all in it together. So first, if anyone in the room has a question so far on what you heard, come on up to the front seats and just hang out. Or there's the side seats. That's how I know how many individuals want to comment. So come on up and kind of stage, and we'll go ahead and get the list online. So with that, use the raise your hand function or state your name, and we'll add you to the speaking list. So go ahead and it's the mute, if it's live, so just kind of bear with us for a second. Okay. So go ahead, if you're online, provide your name or raise your hand. Gabe Miller. Okay. So I have you down, Gabe. Who else? Anyone else? Okay. We'll probably add to the list. So just as a reminder, state your name when you provide your comments, so we all know who's saying what. And then the whole list of ground rules is is in front of you. I don't want to walk through them again. Hopefully I don't have to. And just be mindful of how long and the time it takes to get through your comments. But we may or may not be able to answer your questions here. So we'll start in the room, then we'll go online, then back to the room.
Mine are more just statements of, I've recently moved back from Hawaii, and I used to fish here as a kid growing up and then moved away. But one of the numbers you did not give us was how many sea lions and seals are in the Columbia River Basin now. The other day, my neighbor and I, we counted 120 of them out in front of our house. We live on Taylor Sands, and we counted 120 of them in front of our house. I went down to the boat ramp, which is a mile down the street, and I talked to two fishermen that said they counted over 200 between Taylor Sands and the bridge at Longview Rainier Bridge. Incredible amount of seals. Nobody's ever seen, or sea lions, nobody's ever seen them like this. I heard that they were supposed to be being managed in some way. I don't know, recently being back if that's true, but that's a number that's impacting our runs as well. The other point I would like to make is something that I've talked to a number of fishermen about, is the clipped versus unclipped fish. And while it's great in theory, I'm talking to a lot of fishermen that are hooking clipped fish that are bleeders and having to return them to the water only to feed the sea lions that are there waiting for them at the boat. I think that it's a great idea in theory, but in practice, it's not helping the fish out. A lot of the native fish are just being returned as fish food for the sea lions. And so that's more of a point I would like to make just in my conversations with a lot of fishermen down on the docks. Like I say, it's my first year fishing. I've made it out maybe a couple dozen times, and those are just what I'm hearing back from other fishermen. The other point I wanted to make, sorry. Being able to fish during the active part of the season. Like right now, if you're watching, our season for Chinook ends on the 7th. If you're looking at the Bonneville fish counts, -2 fish over the dam in the last 7 days. The fish aren't moving up. And our season's going to end far before the actual run of fish comes up. And I don't know if you can work with us at all on that or not, extending the season when the fish are actually there so we can go out and catch a fish or two. Those would be my major points that I have. Not really a complaint or argument, but just what I've observed from other fishermen out on the river.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments. I think, Charlene, is there anything you want to speak to on the pinniped piece?
Yeah, I was just going to note we do have a website dedicated to Columbia River sea lion management here at the department, and you know, there's quite a bit of information on there. There is an FAQ or frequently asked questions section, and in that section it says it's estimated that the departments, both Oregon and Washington, via our surveys, are estimating about 2,000 to 3,000 California sea lions near Astoria and about 1,000 Steller sea lions. So I can put that link in the chat, or if there's a better way for us to share that info, we can. But just so folks know, we do have a web page dedicated to that topic. So thanks for that question.
Yeah, and I think the last point you had was on spring Chinook fisheries. You know, not necessarily on topic today, but maybe when the meeting concludes, we can catch you on the side and chat about that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you, sorry,
Excuse me, sir.
could you, I think we might have missed your name.
Michael St. Ange.
Okay, thank you. And then, all right, so you can slide on up, but we're going to switch to virtual. Who else do we have? So Gabe Miller, you're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I see in the next in-river modeling steps for 2023, it says recreational Chinook fishery season objectives as described in the Oregon policy are not expected to be achieved. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Thanks, Gabe. I might look to Oregon to respond since that's the Oregon policy.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So with our harvest reform policy that started in about 2017, there were recreational policy objectives for fall fisheries that included buoy 10, Chinook retention through Labor Day, Chinook retention from Tongue Point to Warrior Rock through September 7th, plus a week of mark selective fishing September 8th through 14th, and then a full fishery season between Warrior Rock and Bonneville Dam, and also between Bonneville and the Oregon-Washington border. And those policies were also based on fairly large runs of upriver rights, which we haven't seen probably since 2016. But and we haven't met those policy objectives probably since about 2015, I would think. But they still are a part of our policy, but not a very realistic part, given the abundances that we're seeing this year. And then I would see if anyone else from Oregon staff wanted to add to that.
This is Jeff. No, Jimmy covered it well there. Described what the commission outlined as objectives, but as he mentioned there, not necessarily realistic or attainable objectives given the abundances and the changes in the fisheries that we've observed since those were initially put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. Anyone else online? All right, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Steve Smith. First time getting involved in the ocean and in river salmon season setting process, and appreciate the opportunity. And I really appreciate how you've done the virtual hookups now. It just, you can't travel around to these meetings, so it makes it very accessible. And I thank everybody for that. Two comments on the I guess the Thule standard. One, I guess I'm disappointed that the Pacific Fishery Management Council would put out one of three alternatives that has an expected impact greater than the Jeopardy standard of 38%. I just don't believe that alternatives that the public should be considering should be violating the no Jeopardy standard. So maybe that's a comment more for PMFC, but I'll make it here as well. The other comment I guess I'd make about that standard and how we're managing towards it is I checked with Susan Bishop up there at NOAA. She got back to me yesterday, and the no Jeopardy standard for the Thule Chinook is not likely to appreciably reduce survival and recovery. That's the 38%, not likely to appreciably reduce. And yet it seems like what we try to do in this management with ocean and river is manage right up to that 38%. And that doesn't seem to me to provide the leeway for these stocks to recover. I think our goal should be recovering these wild Thules so that we don't have to have them as constraints in the future. And so I guess one of my comments would be to the setting of the ocean and river is to consider alternatives that give some leeway to actually promote recovery and not just keep harvesting down to a no Jeopardy standard. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Just want to check with Ocean Fishery Manager Policy Lead if there's anything you wanted to respond, or check in with Jeremy as well with Noah if there's anything else to add. Or
I'll just one of the things Ryan sort of mentioned, maybe didn't, and I mentioned it in my summary, is we still don't know what's going to happen in fisheries to the north. Canada, Southeast Alaska, there's the Pacific Salmon Commission process that has to happen. We don't know exactly what their fisheries will be this year. We don't know what their exploitation rate, their predicted exploitation rate will be. So it's pretty common for one of the council alternatives to exceed the allowable rates on some stocks. Because we need that piece of the puzzle along with the pieces of the puzzle up and down the coast to fit together a set of fisheries from Southeast Alaska to freshwater in Washington and Oregon and California that meet all of the conservation objectives. So it's really not uncommon to have one of those alternatives that exceeds what we know will be the allowable at the end of the whole process.
all right. You do have one? I don't have one. So last call for comments on this front end, and then we'll move on to the next portion of our meeting. Seeing none, hearing none, *6 on phone, unmute. Yeah.
Can I respond to Kyle? Is that okay?
Kyle? Yeah, we got time, so we'll grant it. Thank you.
Steve Smith again. Now, I appreciate your education. I'm trying to get educated here. But one of the things I think many in this room, and particularly me, want to, of course, avoid is everybody harvesting up towards a standard and then the last fishery in line takes the brunt of making the equation work. And I'll be testifying in the next section about creating some leeway there, not only for recovery of these stocks, but to make sure that the correction factor doesn't always fall on the home fisheries where these fish come from. And that, so these fisheries, Southeast Alaska, BC, Washington coast, need to be managed, in my thinking, to allow some buffer there so that we don't find ourselves at the home fishery where these fish come from, having to shut down because they're last in line. Thank you.
Randy, come on up. And I promise, very, very last call. If you're virtual and need to jump in, now's the chance. Otherwise, virtual's done. And then Randy will have the last comment for this portion.
Thanks for letting me comment. Randy Woolsey, Columbia River Recreational Advisory member, member of Northwest Sport Fishing Industry Association. I guess my question might be, hope I'm not getting into the next portion of the meeting, but relative to hatchery, to Lower River hatchery, Lower River wild fish, and the constraints that they put on our fishery for this year, it's been said in the packet that there really isn't a whole lot of difference between what we're looking at this year and last year. So my question is are the constraints changing the modeling for what we're going to see this year relative to what we saw last year, and where those constraints are? That's my question, kind of.
Okay, thank you, Randy. I think that is probably almost the perfect segue to what we will be discussing. So it's a good transition. I think the difference is, and Tucker alluded to, is we don't want to have any form of a repeat of the closure from last year. That is a major, I'm not understating, a major difference from last year, what we were talking to at this meeting, to what we're talking about today. Avoid the in-season risk of a closure. And I mean, from abundance sake and exploitation rates on certain stocks, we're really pretty much in the similar spheres last year. There's a couple nuanced differences from the preseason perspective of discussion, but in season, we just went through. We don't want, no one wants to repeat it last year, and that's why when we get the next section, things are going to look quite a bit different. Avoid a repeat, protect fisheries throughout the lower river and the coho opportunity. So I think that's hopefully what you were looking for, Randy. I think that's what I heard. And so that's going to lead us to the next segue. So now with that, good. Okay. Comments are closed for this portion. We are going to take just a short 10-minute break. So 2:10 will be back online for the rest and talk rec fisheries all the way through. Just need to catch our breath, pivot on the packet. So 2:10 will be back on. All right, everyone, we're already live. So please take your seats. Thank you. If I had a gavel, I'd bang the table. All right, we're gonna roll. Sorry if that was too loud for everyone virtually. Just catching people's attention. We're gonna go ahead and get started. And all right, so the remainder of this meeting is focused on the recreational fishery consideration in river, concepts or approaches that will be wanting your public input on, so we can come out of the council process, or we can go into the council process, sorry, at the 1st of April with one river package that we will have to be considerate of meeting our conservation objectives, policy guidance, and other objectives for this year's fishery planning, which, as we left off the previous version or previous part of this meeting, reducing in-season closure risk. That is a fundamental objective of this year. So just going to kind of do a quick overview of just some background information on the modeling. Kind of already walked through it, but the middle alternative has a lower river Tule exploitation rate of 37.7, of which the river portion is 9.9. And if you're familiar to the harvest rate currency, so that's those fish that hit the river mouth, and then the harvest rate that of the abundance that enters the river, that is 13.7%. And we will be at or below 15% harvest rate for non-treaty fisheries. The middle alternative does have a non-treaty in-river allocation of 25,464 fish, which are shared above and below Priest Rapids Dam. The middle alternative for coho has a LCN coho exploitation rate of 16.7, of which the river portion is 4.1. And then the upriver coho passage, which the objective was no less than 50%. And so that middle alternative puts us at 63%. So we're, in that case, we're achieving that objective. Bit of a broken record, but the policy guidance is no less than 30% commercial and no more than 70% recreational of the lower river hatchery tuna stock. But we will have to be considerate of the upriver bright stickler wild potentially becoming a limit in season if things change on us. So kind of already hit on the season objective for planning purposes, but it is to maintain consistency and reduce the need for in-season closure, understanding that we can't completely remove risk, but we can do a lot to mitigate it. So that's kind of what today's discussion is, some approaches for consideration. And then that we would make as much notice as possible if we had to take action in season, but can't guarantee any amount of notice as things change really fast on us. Stock composition, catch rates, abundances. So kind of the background, what led us into this being very considerate of the in-season closure risk. We over the last several North of Falcon meetings, throughout the year at the Compact Joint State hearings, the angler survey that we conducted this winter, and recreational advisory group discussions. These are a list of issues, concepts, or comments we've kind of heard, and some of these might be familiar because we, I think, put some of these up on the screen last year. But they, won't walk through all the lists, but there's Summership Mark Select, there's minimize in-season closure risk, consideration of Mark Selective at buoy 10, overlap, delay start, days per week approach, overlap to fisheries to avoid, to limit effort shift, reserve impacts for coho fisheries, provide opportunity if you have to close for coho, not complete river closures, and then some elements that we're not really going to be focusing on this year that take more legwork, and those are sub-area closures, limit guide charters, annual Chinook limit, gear modification. Those are just items that it's going to take more time if those are a priority for us to consider in the future, and it's not something we can address today. And then we just have to be mindful of steelhead restrictions given the low steelhead forecast. And we've heard more consideration for steelhead reduced impacts. And then everything must fit within our steelhead modeling. And then just to note, we did kick it out via the compact distribution list, but both states do have the angler survey if you do want to look at it posted online, and the link is provided in this handout. But we are not walking through that survey today. We're just going to talk about the fisheries. All right. So moving on to the next page, starting off with summer. And this is with alternative 2, the middle option. When you consider the allocations that we have for below downstream Priest Rapids and the split between recreational and commercial, that translates into, for below Bonneville, 4,515 fish, and upstream about just shy of 800 fish upstream of Bonneville Dam. That would provide with a 2 fish mark selective season, June 16th, which is the start of the summer Chinook management period, running through July 26th. We have heard some interest in the past about reducing limit to 1. Would that buy you more time? So we just wanted to provide those stats there. If you went 1 fish in June, that would reduce your catch by about 7% in June and 3% in July. And then for upstream Bonneville Dam, with alternative 2, expect the full season. Given the sockeye forecast and objectives for abundances and returns, we anticipate a retention opportunity starting June 16th this year. Moving on to fall Chinook, objectives provide Chinook harvest opportunity in all areas. Standard 2 fish, 1 Chinook limit, non-mark selective regulations unless we specify otherwise in the table that we'll be walking through on the next page. The recreational fishery scenario considerations do incorporate a comparable Lower River Tule impact rate sharing between buoy 10 to and the Lower River fisheries as we've worked with in the years past. The recreational fishery concepts do incorporate modifications to substantially slow their accrual of Lower River hatchery Tule impacts and allow for the improved in-season fishery assessment that we do every year as we collect creel information, tags, etc., and abundance information as we move forward in the season. And then modeling of the recreational fisheries, and particularly for buoy 10, we do incorporate a recent trend of the higher than average Chinook handle rate. So kind of hedging our bets using a large handle rate to work with planning to avoid and limit the risk of in-season closure. We do have multiple scenarios ranging from non-mark selective, delay start, mark selective, or some combination of approaches that's on the next page that we'll walk through. And the season structures attempts to align retention seasons to reduce effort shift when possible, but we still expect effort shift to occur, especially for areas upstream of Bonneville Dam after mid-September. And then reserving and incorporating Chinook mortalities for the buoy 10 coho fishery and October onward for the Lower River recreational fisheries upstream of Puget Island. And I mentioned this once, but we will come out of this with one strategy walking into the April council meeting, and we will update the time periods that you see on the table in accordance to meeting and conservation objectives and public input. And with the fundamental element of reducing the risk for closing early in season and closing other fisheries due to any one fishery going over on their preseason expectations. As Kyle mentioned earlier, and I mentioned once as well, we still don't have a complete understanding of the northern fishery abundances that affect, such as Little River tules. That would be like West Coast, Vancouver Island, north of the border. Those will have an effect. We just don't know what yet. And if further modifications are needed, we will prioritize and focus on continued reduced risk of in-season closure, improving our ability to assess the fishery in season, try to limit regulation complexity, but it's, there still will be some complexity involved, and we will take into consideration effort shift. So those are the fundamental concepts that we'll, or considerations we'll have for when we modify and get to a final river suite of regulations for this fall. So moving on to this next page, I think I'm going to pass off the mic to Jeff, who's going to walk through this table, which is page 11.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I'm gonna pick it up here a little bit, give Ryan a little bit of a break. He's been doing a lot of the talking and presentation here today. So following this table, we provided a fair bit of text on some of the details and rationale and some more information on these different concepts we provided. So I encourage folks to be sure to read through that section. Also, to get a little more context as we're talking through it here, it may answer some of the questions you have, but I think making sure folks are have read through that will help when it comes to the discussion later on this afternoon once we get through the presentation here. So, as Ryan has mentioned several times here, our intent going into crafting these different concepts is to maximize the number of fishing days opportunities, but also reducing the likelihood of in-season emergency actions like we've seen for the last several years in a variety of fisheries. But we all have seen how we're working with a zero-sum game here. So effects in one fishery can ripple out into others and cause unintended consequences. And what we're really trying to do here is to reduce the likelihood of that situation occurring. And I'm not just for this year, but also we're being mindful of trying to develop some, consistent, stable, predictable season structures that can be durable through time as well. Environmental conditions are changing, the fishery is changing. Admittedly, we've had a hard time keeping up with a lot of those changes. And just the very nature of these fisheries, they're very dynamic, and especially buoy 10 can handle a lot of fish in a short amount of time. And those are all details that we have to deal with and try to manage and also remain within our conservation objectives as well. So that's some of the kind of overarching intent we have here. So please keep those ideas in mind as we step through the concepts we've laid out in this table here. So just to orient folks a little bit, we've got some different scenarios for the 3 sub areas downstream of Bonneville Dam. So that's the area of buoy 10 up to West Puget Island up to the Lewis River Warrior Rock boundary, and then the Warrior Rock line up to Bonneville Dam, and then additionally the fishery upstream of Bonneville, extending up to the Highway 395 bridge in Pasco, Washington. So we've got 5 concepts for the buoy 10 fishery. Obviously, that's one has been pretty tricky to manage here recently, and we've got 2 concepts each for the other 2 sub areas downstream of Bonneville Dam. Let's see, overall, generally speaking, daily bag limits be 2 adult salmon, one Chinook when Chinook is open. We do at Buoy 10 have an increased coho bag limit in September planned as well. We've done that for the last couple of years with some success. And let's see, steelhead, I think we've already mentioned, retention will be closed throughout the fall season. In just about all of this area, there will be potentially some retention opportunity upstream of Bonneville Dam in the fall. So get it in steelhead details a little bit later. So maybe let's see. Let's start with Buoy 10 here. We've got 5 concepts detailed out on this chart here, and some of them are kind of related. So I want to try to orient people a little bit to that. So maybe it'll help as we view it and discuss these here. So the first concept is just a straight what happens if you start off non-mark selective regulation, so full retention for Chinook on August 1, and we've modeled out the basic season structure there. It'll get you a couple of weeks. So again, as we've already talked about, the dates themselves are not something necessarily to get hung up on, because those will move somewhat as we continue to shape these fisheries, as we're informed by additional ocean fishery planning and information. But again, the idea is, kind of the number of days and the placement of those days within the calendar here. So that first one, about 2 weeks or so of Chinook opportunity, and then there would be a likely closure until September, when the fishery would reopen for coho retention through the end of the year. And then moving to the second one, number 2 and 4 are related here, I think, and can kind of be viewed side by side. So 2 approaches at providing non-mark selective Chinook opportunity at Buoy 10 in August and early September, with the first one, 4-day blocks, and then number 4 there is 3-day blocks. So it kind of shows you the differential between those 2 scenarios. And then the other point, I don't think we've talked about it in detail yet, but you'll see it throughout these Buoy 10 concepts here, this idea of a reduced area for coho only retention. So that's that downstream of Buoy 20 concept. So we haven't defined a line yet. It's still in the conceptual phase. If that's a concept that people are amenable to and support, we will work further to actually define the line itself. But the intent there would be to provide coho opportunity and reduce the handle of Chinook during that time. So again, common theme here, when Chinook retention is closed, we've layered on this idea of coho only opportunity to fill the gaps there a little bit. So so 2 and 4 are 2 different approaches at short blocks of non-mark select Chinook retention opportunity with some coho only opportunity in those interstitial spaces. And then 3 and 5 are also very similar concepts with a pretty robust mark selective period. Both of those, roughly, 25 days or so, getting fairly deep into August. And then the difference between those 2 is the Chinook opportunity over Labor Day weekend. So either a non-mark selective or a mark selective opportunity over Labor Day weekend. The number of days we think would be different there, but those are the differences essentially between those. So it's just kind of what retention opportunity regulations for the Labor Day weekend. And then the gaps are pretty much filled there with coho only opportunity downstream of this hypothetical buoy 20 line. So, outside of concept 1 and 3, I believe it is, no, 1 and 4, buoy 10 would not close once it's open. Chinook retention may close, but the fishery itself would be able to remain open. So that's generally the concept we've tried to lay out there. And then moving upriver for the next sub area, West Puget Island up to the Lewis River Warrior Rock line, 2 different scenarios there. The first one is full non-mark select, starting August 1 and running through. And then the second one is what it would take to get a little deeper into September, into mid-September there. And what we've crafted here is a 3-day-a-week block open Chinook opportunity throughout that time frame. So to get deeper into September, you have to reduce the number of days per week. And then for the area Warrior Rock upstream to Bonneville, similar to Puget to Warrior there that I described, a straight non-mark select concept that runs straight through into mid-September. The second scenario there is what it would take to get basically through the month of September in this area. And so that would be moving to a 3-day-a-week structure following after Labor Day, starting, roughly September 8th or so there. And so by, again, moving to that, reduced number of days per week allows you to get a little deeper into, or conceivably all the way through September if things hold. I think one other thing maybe I didn't mention off the top is that at least for the area West Puget to Bonneville, the idea here is that salmon would be closed if Chinook was closed until October, when we can basically open everything back up. So not anticipating coho only opportunity in the lower river if Chinook retention is not open. And then for the fishery upstream of Bonneville Dam, we've got that fishery has really grown quite a bit over the last few years. A lot of it because of some of the instability in lower river fisheries and the desire for people to find some opportunity, and people have been moving up there and figuring out how to fish that area. So that one is growing quite a bit. What we've got laid out here is a fairly conservative approach, at least for the preseason plan. And then our intent would be to look at that in season once we've got potentially some in season run size abundance updates, and we've got more information on the performance of the other fisheries as well. So we've got it right now through about mid-October, but there is some potential, like I said, to review that in season and adjust as necessary. So I think that kind of covers what I wanted to lay out here for folks. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all this text after the box, but please do read through that. It'll provide a little extra insight for people there and inform the discussion that we're about to have.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
Maybe just checking in with staff if anything else to add to the table, and then I have a couple points on the next page.
Yeah, I think I think we've said this a couple of times, but I think the idea behind essentially all of these options, right, is to not, pencil out essentially every impact available up front, because when you do that, you put yourself in a place where, if there is a variable that changes, if effort is higher, on any particular day or much higher, or the stock comp on those days was much different, you have put yourself in a place where you are forced into taking actions that people don't want to have. So you need to leave yourself some breathing room. And so that's really sort of generally what most of these things are targeted at doing. I think the other thing to keep in mind, right, is that these are really complex and difficult to manage fisheries. They have multiple limiting stocks, and they start out with one limiting stock, and then they all switch over eventually to another limiting stock. And so there is a definite balancing act between trying to keep those fisheries going and not through the early season, while still making sure that you maintain enough impacts to try to keep your later season fisheries going as well. And I think that's the balancing act you're attempting to see through these options from staff.
Thanks, Tucker. So I think covered this page really well. Jeff did, and he covered most every bullet point on this next page with the walkthrough of the table. I just want to bring up a couple pieces I thought was worth sharing in addition. The note on the mark rate there in buoy 10, the early part of August, or in mid-August, it's about 60% mark rate. It's what the forecast is. When you get to late August, early September, it drops to 40%. So just, that's captured in this handout. I think the only other, I think that was pretty much it. I did want to also, again, for the room, apologize that the screen is blurry. It's technology is all I can say. Try our best. But with that, I'm just going to get to the bottom line here. With that, consideration that Tucker laid out and Jeff laid out, not pushing us all the way to the end and increase or be, where we've been in the past with that risk of pushing the fishery to the needle of having to take action and close it down. We're mitigating risk by those concepts that we've walked through, taking several steps to get there. But that being said, the concepts developed were built within the existing exploitation rate that we're working with in the current model run. And so given the LRH sharing of constraints, that would, with what is an alternative 2, I think is at 9.9, that would equate to the recreational portion of being no more than 6.91% exploitation rate. And there is a tributary component of about 0.3% lower river exploitation rate that's part of that 6.91. So just wanted to make a point of that. And I think talked about in-season changes. We'll just have to keep an eye on it and add, hopefully we're in a case of adding fisheries. That's kind of where we want to be, not closing down, reducing. I think with that, we're just trying to do the old, just trying to make this easy on everyone when we get in season and not pull the rug out from under them. That's a fundamental approach. So kind of a broken record, but just going to say it one more time. So going to keep us moving forward and trying to save plenty of time for questions, comments. So we're getting really close, I promise. Next page is the summer steelhead regulation proposals, which do largely align with last year. Basically, if steelhead is open, it's really just below Bonneville Dam to the Dalles. It would just be a 1 fish limit. That's what we've done in the past. Otherwise, close the retention. And Jeff made note that above buoy 10, when Chinook retention closes prior to October, it would just be a Salmon inlet closure. So we've got a lot of these, what we call rolling block closures. That's kind of what's in play for steelhead restrictions, and they do roll into some of the dip-in areas upstream of Bonneville Dam as well. So basically what you saw last year is probably a likely outcome for this year for steelhead opportunity, or I should say restrictions. A couple other little side notes. Barbless hooks are required downstream of the Oregon-Washington border year-round, and then the boat angling regulation is still in play. With that, just kind of on to what to expect from here on out. Not going to rehash this because I've said it 2 or 3 times, but we'll come out. Staff will get to one strategy to go into the council meeting and adjust accordingly, considering meeting our conservation objectives and mitigating the in-season closure risk. And there's this various steps there that we will take into consideration. And then that last bullet point there is just a notice that we have in-season management and things move fast and things change on us, and we don't mean to make it difficult. We're doing the best with what we have to provide fishing opportunities. So with that, I think we're going to jump into the region tributary handout. I'll throw that up on the screen. It'll be pretty brief, then we'll get to public comments. So just give me 1 second.
Okay, you've got it.
I've got it.
Got it there?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks everybody for being here. Just want to run through the Region 5 tributary handout. Just to introduce myself, I'm Matt Gardner. I'm the District 9 fish biologist, but I'll be sort of handling or covering rules here for Districts 9 and 10 today. So just to give you an overview, I'm going to kind of jump through salmon first, and then talk about steelhead regulations following that, and things should be pretty brief. So just to start off here, first we're going to go with the describe the Lewis River and change we're proposing there in the salmon regulation. So if you kind of look at the comparison between the current and recommended in that August through September period, really no change in that. This is a mark selective period in there. So we have a change, two different basically management periods in the Lewis, an early to manage for toolies in there, and then a later season that allows for some harvest of Lewis River brights. And for this year, in that later period, in bold, from October through December is really kind of where the change is. So a little bit lower forecast this fall for the Lewis River bright forecast, and so just a sort of a conservative reduction to 1 adult daily limit, would still allow for the 3 coho, up to 3 coho, but just that for the Chinook portion, just a reduction to 1 in comparison to looks like 3 as it was last year. So okay, moving on to just wanted to, I guess, highlight just other tributaries here where we either have Chinook or coho programs, hatchery programs, or have in recent years done some regulation changes, and we just provide this list of where we aren't of the tributaries where we aren't proposing rule changes for this year. I'm not going to go probably through all of these by detail, but just to list those off maybe in lieu of that. So that would be the Elokman River, the Cowlitz River, the Toutle and North Fork Toutle, and Green, and as well as the South Fort Toutle. Continuing on the Kalama, Washougal, Wind, Drano Lake, and Klickitat rivers as well. So again, those are areas where, based on the tributary forecast we have for Chinook and Coho this year, we feel like we're in a good place with the permanent rules we have, and we're not proposing any changes in those areas. Okay, so just to move on a bit to the steelhead portion of the rule change proposals. So just first kind of want to cover the areas where we're proposing to maintain rules we've been working with. So this is primarily the tributary areas in Bonneville Pool above Bonneville Dam, obviously. So these include the sort of lower reaches of several rivers. So this would be the Wind River below the Highway 14 bridge, the entirety of Drano Lake, the White Salmon River below the County Road Bridge, and then the Klickitat River below Shepherd Falls. Scroll a little bit. And so the sort of conservation strategies and rule changes we've used in there is to implement sort of full closures on steelhead angling and retention during the months of July through October, as well as night closures for salmon and steelhead angling from July 1 through October 31st. So those are areas similar to that last section on salmon, where we're planning to maintain those rules from last year. So moving down, so next I just want to step into 3 lower river tributary areas where we are considering or proposing today to modify the rule changes we've had in previous years. So these include sort of the lowest reaches of the Cowlitz, Kalama, and Lewis rivers. Specifically, it's the Cowlitz from the mouth up to Lexington Bridge, the Kalama from the mouth to the railroad bridge below I-5, and then in the Lewis from the mouth up to the confluence with the East Fork. And maybe just to first summarize rules we have had in previous years. So in these areas, we had reduced daily limits in July and September, 1 steelhead daily limits, closures on angling and retention in August, and as well as night fishing closures in these areas. So for this year, the proposed rules there that we're reviewing, essentially we would sort of align these lower river reaches with their sort of adjacent upstream reach. And in effect, this would sort of restore for our hatchery steelhead in those areas, would restore sort of our standard daily limit of 3 hatchery steelhead, effectively make these areas open year round, and then also permit angling at night. So if we can move down a little bit in the handout, I just want to take the opportunity here to, I guess, lay out sort of some of our rationale for the rule changes. And so sort of this was the proposals are an outgrowth of sort of a review that we did within the agency beginning in 2021. So following sort of the record low returns that we saw at Columbia for summer steelhead that year, the Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission asked department staff to do a review of information about cold water refugia and how we manage fisheries in those areas. So internally, staff reviewed available literature, angler creel survey data we had, fishery management plans that we work with, as well as also agreements we might have, and just use subject matter knowledge that we had within the agency. And so that culminated in the development of a cold water refugia white paper that was delivered to the Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission in 2022. If you're interested, if you are accessing the tributary document through the website, that document is linked at the end of this, or if you're here in person today, that link's available for you to review that the white paper for Washington cold water refuges. So we can move up just a little bit to wrap up. So some of the items that were a little bit more that were identified in that paper were that yes, there's acknowledgement that certain tributaries below Vaudeville Dam Washington tributaries are of sufficient size and area for discharge to serve as cold water refugia. Primarily the largest of those being the Cowlitz River, followed by the Klamath and Lewis, which are smaller in area, have lower discharge rates, and less angler utilization in their respective cold water zones. So in comparison, we'd expect any impacts in comparatively with the Cowlitz to be even lower. But some of the items that we identified or spoke to in that the cold water refugia white paper were the we expected presumed low impacts were sort of in the lower Cowlitz. We have a sort of very shallow area. There's that in summertime flows are lower and presents sort of a obstacle to non-local stocks, and primarily we believe fish use the cold water plume more so in the main stem than attempted to cross that obstacle in the lower area. Also, the timing at which summer steelhead could be at their highest prevalence in this area. There's quite a bit of fall Chinook and coho fishing occurring in the plume area to a much greater extent than we find in the lower Cowlitz in that area. And also, staff believe that unlike some of the cold water refugia in Bonneville Pool, residence time in these areas is probably much lower in these lower river tribs. Also, we sort of report an account of on the dip-in impacts in these areas, and find that they're not fully utilized with current fishery structures as we kind of reduce at lower return sizes. And so we feel that there's opportunity to utilize or expand in some of these spots. So we feel that these proposals for the Cowlitz, Klamath, and Lewis rivers this year allow us to provide a bit of expanded opportunity for anglers to capitalize on some of the local hatchery stocks that we release there and balance that with conservation for upriver steelhead.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. All right. Switching back to the handout. So with that, I think most of the discussion is going to be on this page. I'm just going to leave it here, but we're ready to take public comment questions. So we'll do it like we did earlier, where we'll rotate from virtual to in-person. Again, I don't want to have to remind everyone of ground rules, but if I have to, I will, or Tucker will, and we will deal with that then. Just remember, we want to hear from everyone that has thoughts. So kind of, be mindful of letting others get their opportunity. We may or may not be able to answer questions, be professional, stuff on issues, not on people, or organizations, and be mindful of the amount of time for your comments. And we may or may not be able to answer, but we do appreciate everyone's thoughts today. And if you aren't able to provide thoughts verbally, whether virtually or in person, there still is the online portal that we have linked in here that you can put your comments in twice, virtually and in person, or online and this way. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. If anyone has thoughts on concepts for consideration, we have 2 seats here. I was hoping to have those as standby seats in case they stack up. Sorry. But that being said, come on up. There's 2 seats here. We'll kind of start off with one. We'll rotate around and then we'll take virtual names. L2 guest. Okay. I'll sit with you.
Yeah.
All right. And just a reminder, state your name, and then that will get us started. So start with you.
Is the floor mine? Good afternoon.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Bill Monroe Jr., fishing guide, also represents a lot of interest out there in, say, Northwest Guides and Anglers, now Washington State's Guides Association. I want to start off by saying, first of all, as always, this is some of the most difficult stuff, and it's nice to actually tell you this to your face for once, rather than on a phone, because that's not nearly enough to show you guys that we mean that we appreciate it. Secondly, last year it became pretty clear, and when you get a closure like what we had last year, where all brakes had to be put on full step, it was clear that toolies are running the show. You guys know this, we all know it, and we're managing this resource based on toolies. And if you ask a lot of the towns out there, the people, the industries, whatever, toolies are kind of getting a bad rap and they're ruining fisheries. It's really difficult on the whole big picture, and it's become now like full circle. With that said, and I need to make sure Jeff Whistler is on this too, I'm not quite sure why we even have options in here that have non-marked select fisheries after an example of what we had last year. I just don't think that's really a great idea. If anything, we should really be looking at option number 5, and it should be a marked select fishery from 8.1 through 9.4 with no buoy 10 to buoy 20 break. I only say that because last year that concept worked at 100 and 104% of expectation, which meant it worked. And then all of a sudden we went to non-marked select, and it was a mess. You guys already know. Another thing on the Lewis to Bonneville options, I don't even see a Reed Island to Bonneville option in there. And that was a big deal for last year to even get you to be able to say, hey, there was no marked tags that have been notated above Washougal. So why not have that in the matrix, which is not there currently? And it does show some options between 1 and 2 there is having pauses or a 3-day week fishery. It's kind of a thing to put a tool in the toolbox there. I don't know, other than going off of like LRH forecasts, which last year was like a 4,000 fish different. The forecast is improved for this year, and it came in way over expectation. And this year, we still, federal fisheries, they are not going to be a run that's upgradable in season. We now know this, and we need to ask if that is actually confidence, or can that run be made to be specifically like detailed and looked at, that run can be higher forecasted or not, because that will not be an option for us when it comes time if things do fall apart. That's all I got. I just hope you guys know that we appreciate you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. I guess just one point I so I appreciate the Reed Island, thought that was an in-season creation. So good to have that brought up, and appreciate your thoughts on the other portions of the fishery. I guess just from a note from how we manage, it's 2 dead fish with ESA impact. So there are some people prefer marked select, some prefer opportunities to harvest clipped or unclipped. So that's a value, but we are pegging this we are managing this to exploitation rates, which is still dead fish. It's just how you do it is the difference, but really appreciate your thoughts. Anything else?
Yeah, I guess, I don't want to dwell too much, but again, these fisheries are complex and multiple stocks that limit. So Tooley's limit early. Big River Wilds will limit late. And so if Reed Island to Bonneville fishery is a tool that we can use in a case of an emergency, but it tends to stack people in a place and towards a time where that fishery is shifting over to where the Snake River wilds are the limiters. And so, you know, it's something we can do if we need to, but ideally we're trying to optimize and opportunity, you know, temporally, so through time, but also in space. So, thank you, though. That's.
Thanks, Tucker. Just if other staff online need to jump in and do it. Otherwise, just want to acknowledge we're collecting virtual hands and it's being passed off. So if you don't hear me call your name, it's probably because you're further down the list. Just want to make that note. So next up, I'm going to go virtual. If someone, I don't know who that is, but L2 guest. State your name.
Hello. Hi, this is Larry Lavoie.
Thank you, Larry.
L2,
Go ahead.
L2. In your bullet list, you mentioned, it says, staff will make every attempt to provide as much notice as possible for potential action related to fishery closures. In the past, really the public has no idea where things stand with respect, you know, how buoy 10 is tracking. And all of a sudden, people get a 12-hour or 24-hour notice that it's closing. Is there any plan to somehow provide more of an update so people can track a little bit better as to how things are going, either a numbers thing or at least a red light, yellow light, green light, so that people aren't blindsided at the last minute and not having any idea how the fishery is tracking?
Thank you, Larry. I guess offhand, in the past, we have done fishery update notices via the compact distribution. I think if we know what we have at a certain point in time, we're definitely open to that concept, but it is definitely work when we're busy, but that's how we've done it in the past when we don't have action in season. I don't know if there's anything else. But right now, nothing that works.
We don't have anything concrete looking towards that, but we are always striving to think about ways to get better within the bandwidth that we have.
Well, yes, I mean, the last several years and the last several years of closures, you know, people have been surprised and frankly blindsided by how soon something has happened, and they had no idea that, you know, things were getting close or even tracking ahead of schedule. And at least a qualitative statement like that alerts them that, you know, that something might be coming up. That's one. Conclude that question. I have one other comment. Have you considered, like in option 5, you've got a mark selective in August, and then you've got a break, and then you've got a 8/31 to 9/4 mark selective add-on. You know, various people like the non-selective part or the mark selective part. There's a lot of folks that really prefer non-selective. But I was wondering, you could have the season set up like in 5, but have a announced notification that you would make a call on, like, say, August 27th or something, depending on where you are after the first mark selective period, that would allow for one or all of those 8/31 to 9/4 days to go to non-selective. So people would already have their vacation scheduled. They would already be knowing that they could fish there, but they would have the added benefit that maybe they would have, you know, a couple days of non-selective during that prime time. Had you considered something like that?
So, you know, I know staff are always striving, like we said, to optimize opportunity throughout the season. We are looking for ways within season generally to increase opportunity. Unfortunately, at buoy 10 the last couple of years and in the fall, we have not had that ability. It's had to go the other way. I think if we're in a place where we see that additional opportunity is available, that we could satisfy that, certainly we would look at it. I think trying to set a predetermined time to do that is, I wouldn't want to try to commit to that, right? I mean, because
You do
you
have
only
that
know
weekend.
what you
You do
know
have that week
when you
in
know
there
it,
to
and you don't know
figure
what
out
you
where
don't
you're
know,
at.
right? So, you know, if you try to say, hey, by August 27th, we're going to tell you one way or the other. Well, okay, we get to August 27th and we can't tell you, you know, that we can, but things continue to track. And so everybody just sort of gives up and stops paying attention to that. But, you know, we get another 4 or 5 days in and maybe we can add a day. So that's, you know, I don't see us hitting
You're
a
already scheduled to
predetermined
be,
mark.
yeah, you're already scheduled mark selective on 8/31 to 9/4. All I'm saying is during that 26 to 30 time frame in there, you could assess whether, well, we're working pretty good. We can, in that 8/31 to 9/4 time that's already on the books, we could have a day or two or whatever of non-select as a little added bonus. No guarantees, of course, but as an added bonus.
Yeah, and I think what I'm trying to say is I think we would continually do that sort of thing, but we wouldn't like announce, you know, on April 15th that on August 27th, we're going to let people know if that's the case, because it's just impossible to know.
And I want to make note, I think one of our staff wants to jump in. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, Larry, I hear what you're saying there. I take a look at concept 3 there. I think that's kind of what you're talking about. And that's what I described when I was going through the table earlier. Basically two, those, 3 and 5 there have the same mark select period up front. Then Chinook retention would close while Coho remains open using that buoy 20 sub area. And then there's 2 different scenarios for what Chinook regulations might look like over the Labor Day weekend. There's one, mark select in number 5 there, and a non-mark select scenario in number 3 there. So I think that's precisely what we'd be doing during that time, is assessing, where the fishery sits at that point in time, and then making a call. But that's something
Yeah, I
we
understand.
need to look at in season, though, when we get to that point.
And Jeff and Larry, we have a substantial number of people in the room and quite a few people online. So I think we're going to go ahead and move on to the next comment, if that's okay.
Yeah. So we'll move back to the room. I think it's Steve.
Yeah.
Yep. But just state your name one more time.
Thank you very much, Steve Smith, sport fisherman. Just on that last topic, you might think about how might be able to use your creel checkers to get information updates, on where we stand relative to tulies and everything, or whatever is limiting. First of all, thank you, Washington, for your angler survey last fall. I thought that was a really nice step, and I did participate. That's a good way to start getting input on a tough situation. As far as the options go here, they're complicated. I've got to look at them study them before I give any thoughts on that. I'll do that later. But I really thank you on your focus about avoiding closure. I think that's a real key objective for this year. And obviously, we don't need to go in the details of last year. One kind of bigger comment, I guess, is maybe I thought this meeting was going to be about north of Falcon. So it's river and the ocean. It seems like it's river, and I'm learning. But I just don't think we can solve these problems or take advantage of all of our opportunities by kind of segmenting this harvest, the river separate from the ocean. We have to look, I believe, at what's going on in the proposed ocean fisheries in order for us to do maybe zero in on some better options for the river. And probably don't have time today, but I think there's some hatchery options of how we use our hatchery fish that can maybe better contribute to more stable fisheries up and down the coast and in the river. But that's for another time. I already spoke about the need to try to reserve some exploitation rate for recovery, and I'll just leave it at that. I think setting up alternatives to try to target to 38% is not the goal that I'd recommend anyway. My belief is we have to establish council ocean Chinook and Cove fisheries such that we can ensure, or with low risk of closure, the Columbia River zone in the ocean and the Buoy 10 fisheries. And I look at these options and they're good options, good concepts for not having unknown closures. But when I look at the data up and down the coast, your stock contribution data, I look in, the Oregon coast south of Falcon is predominantly Columbia River fish, Chinook and coho harvested. The Oregon coast, over 92% of their Chinook do not come from the Oregon coast. They come from California or the Columbia River. 99% of their coho come from other than the Oregon coast. And, you can go to marine area 2 to 4 on the Washington coast. 67% of the Chinook sport and commercials from the Columbia River. I don't have the coho data here. 86% of their Chinook caught in marine area 2 to 4, 86% is non-local stocks. So we have these intercepting fisheries, and that's salmon management. I understand that. But I think when I look at objectives of the council and maybe yourselves, this idea of sharing the harvestable surplus. Columbia River is producing the harvestable surplus, and we share that up and down the coast, and I understand that. But when the other coastal regions get longer seasons, less restrictions, and they're harvesting predominantly Columbia River fish, I think the tail is wagging the dog, in my opinion. I realize it's been probably going on that way for decades, but I think it's time for the ocean fisheries to take a step back in order to ensure that we don't have to get into these kinds of closures on the Columbia River, restricting the Columbia River. The home fisheries get these restrictions, which are necessary or may be necessary in order to not have the in-season closures. But I don't think the Columbia River Zone Ocean and the Buoy 10 and the wobbler fishing upriver should have to have restrictions other than what other fisheries are going through up and down the coast. They shouldn't be restricted more than those fisheries. They're harvesting Columbia River fish. So this is doesn't fit right into the box of Columbia River fisheries, but I suggest that's how this problem has to be solved. And I won't get into details now about seasons, but if nothing else, start the ocean fisheries a week later, whatever, to ensure that you don't have to go to these kinds of severe steps for the local fisheries from which the fish come.
Anything else, Steve?
Oh yeah, one other thing. So
we're looking for river concepts for us to consider.
Then I'm done. Thanks.
Okay,
appreciate it.
But I do want to make a point that what you see for concepts is an ability to use what would equate to a similar amount of Thule impacts that we kind of planned, that we had last year to start off with. This is a development of fitting within that forum to mitigate early closures. Just want to make that clarification. It's not taking a cut to create space for other fisheries to, absorb that there is a difference. I just want to make that point. So I'm going to move on, got to go online, and then we'll be back to Larry. So Pat O'Grady, you're up next. Go ahead, Pat.
Okay, you guys ready there?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you for all your hard work and help here and all that. Mortality rate on the coho is very high at Buoy 10 with the warm water. First fish you catch, you keep. Put that in place if you could sometime down the road here. Six-pack impact will be high this year from out-of-state fisheries, California, Idaho, Montana, etc. So you need to be careful with that. Early catch of tulies can close the fisheries and shut down Lower River. Local sport fishery does not have a chance for any upriver bites later in the season here because of closure. I suggest opening up Buoy 10 in the middle of August. We want to check on the green line from Astoria Bridge to Nygaard sawdust pile. Should still be closed for fall fisheries. So there's no impact on the unspayed gillnet fisheries that gillnetters pay for their net fish each year in the pen. That's all I have to say. Thanks for everybody's time.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Larry Phillips, American Sport Fishing Association. So as others have said, I appreciate the platform here and the transparency. And I think this is great. I don't necessarily have a comment on which option or concept I think is the best approach, but we would obviously hope the consideration would be time on the water and taking advantage of harvestable stocks. Obviously, the math there is, at the end of the day, it's what's going to benefit the recreational fishery and also meet our conservation objectives. The sideboards, obviously, it's easier to plan for predetermined closure dates than it is to adjust to a closure date that you didn't see. So appreciate that opportunity. We also would hope that a consideration would be made on these not being hard blackout dates or hard closure dates, so that if we're tracking at a pace that was different than preseason expectations, then there's an opportunity to maybe within season manage that in a way that's flexible. The coho opportunity is massive. The opportunity, the directed only coho fishery after our Chinook season's over is a big deal. And I remember sitting here a couple months ago having a conversation, postseason conversation at the Washington Commission meeting that was difficult to have. And I know you guys, it's unpredictability of this fishery will continue to remain, which brings me to my last point. The challenges that we face are gonna continue. We're gonna have emergency closures. The avoidance of closures is simply, in my mind, based on recent year history, it's going to continue. The challenge I think we face is where we intercept that closure date that gives us options, right? If we have no option, where we don't, like last year, again, I hate to keep bringing this up because I know it's a sore spot for everybody, but when we have a conversation about there's an announcement through the compact that we're not having a meeting, it's just closed indefinitely, that doesn't give us options to slow down the fishery or be creative. So this is a tens of millions of dollars of economic benefit to the Lower Columbia, to the community, to the industry. So if there's a need for additional resources, and I thinking out loud here, if we can identify some criteria, we would make in-season management decisions based on no more than 48 hours of updated impacts, or some sort of process where we've got code-wire tag labs reading evenings and weekends. We would raise our hands and certainly go to the legislatures of both of the states to advocate for funding for that program. It's just too important, and you guys are working your tails off, and the opportunities that we could have in front of us based on a robust funded sampling program, to me, would be an asset to this program and opportunities. So thank you.
Thank you. Moving online, David Moskowitz. So go ahead, David.
David, if you are trying to provide testimony, you must be on mute. So maybe check. Okay, so we're gonna skip David for now. We'll still go online. Jesse Vassar.
Thanks, Tucker. Yeah, Jesse Vassar, Columbia River Recreational Advisor. Looking at these, it's hard for me, think about we're in the position to go to, mark select only fisheries for the situation we're in, but it kind of is what it is, I guess. But, looking at last year, I think when we look at that buoy 10 fishery, up until we went to non-mark select, I think that our preseason modelings were really tracking right on. So going to mark select, I truly think that if you start that fishery on 8/1, then you have a realistic chance to get it through Labor Day weekend there in that scenario. I think that going down the line a little bit here, this West Puget Island up to Warrior Rock, to me, this is the biggest risk that we have here in opening that area up to non-mark selective fisheries. We ran into that situation in 2021 where that area had a very big impact, if not as much as buoy 10, on closing that season down. So I think that area going to non-mark select could end up putting our seasons all in jeopardy and getting us into that middle of September fishery for that lower river. If we move that line up to Warrior Rock or somewhere where we've had it in the past, I think that we have opportunity, maybe even to see this season go well in past that September 15th date that we're seeing in here. So I think that's the biggest thing for me in looking at this is that the risk that West Puget Island to Warrior Rock management goal there kind of puts on running that season. The other thing, I'm not a huge fan of that buoy 10 or buoy 20 sub area. I think that I see a little bit of that as an enforcement nightmare. In a situation like that, I would probably, if we had to put some kind of a sub area in place like that, I would probably lean towards the bridge. I think that spreads that area out a little bit, and I don't really see the difference in handling between buoy 20 and Hammond. That's not much of a difference in area there. So anyways, that's what I got. As always, I truly appreciate your guys' work that you put into these. I know that there's the countless hours and I'm sure sleepless nights and everything that go into your guys' time in preparing this agenda for us. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks,
Jesse.
Yep. Thanks. All right. I'm going to come back to the room. Got Randy up next.
Oh, thank you very much, Ryan Tucker. I want to go back in my memory to
Randy, can you speak your name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry, Randy Woolsey.
Thank you.
Woolsey. I want to go back to September 1st of last year. It was a very frustrating time. The anglers were incredibly frustrated. I know staff was frustrated, had to make some very difficult decisions overnight. I was incredibly frustrated. The industry had a black eye through that whole thing. Very difficult to keep payrolls going and people with their jobs. Check my math, but number 5 on the list is a mark selected fishery with a stop in between. And it's that stop that really kind of bothers me. Since September of last year, we've been talking to anglers about a mark selected fishery. For the most part, they've bought into it. The survey that was sent out, mark selective was a very, probably the majority in that survey. So it just seemed to us that the mark selective survey was the way to go. But with the model we asked for was to take it all the way through the season and have staff monitor it, and at the appropriate time where something might be changing in the fishery, to slow the fishery down. It's my understanding, and again, I said you could check my math, but it was my understanding that the first 25 days of the season last year, we used 30% of our impacts. So that left a significant number of impacts to get us through the season into Labor Day. But because of the non-mark selective fishery, 3 days of fishing was, whether it was 2 or 3 days, but we just blew that number out and really turned that into a broken fishery. we can't continue on that way. I think most fishermen agree that we can't continue on that way, but a stop in the season is just as bad. And it really, in my mind, makes 1 through 4 a moot point, that none of them are going to work. So 5 is the only possibility, and I would love to see staff. As a matter of fact, the question I would ask is, those 2 or 3 days that blew the season out last year, what was the mark rate on those fish? You guys must have those numbers. So are we able to, I mean, I'm sure that was probably even taken into consideration in the modeling. I hope it was. But if we can get into Labor Day and have it monitored on an ongoing basis, and then if we have to, shift it into a coho fishery. But please don't stop. Stop and starting is incredibly difficult. So thank you for your time.
Thanks. Yeah, again, this is a Chinook, closure retention. It's not stopping the fishery. It is shifting it for that period of time to coho only. So, I mean, it'll still be open in a portion of the area. We are trying to be, with this option, really careful about not having to do that, flip a switch and stun everybody maneuver. So, I mean, that's, I don't want to do a huge back and forth. I'm happy to talk to you online. I just want to say again, that's really what we're trying to accomplish with this, and not penciling out everything, and also trying to maximize number of days and still sort of grab some of that Labor Day weekend. Thanks.
And Randy, we are looking up that last year's mark rate question, but we'll get it to you offline, or if the opportunity presents itself, I'll share it once we track it down.
All right, thank you.
All right, switching back online, I'm gonna just do a quick check if David Moskowitz is available to provide comments. We're still having audio issues. Okay, I'll come back to David. If you can hear me, just chat with Mertice on there. Maybe we can work something out. So I'm gonna jump ahead. Robert Moxley, you're up next.
All right, you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good, just thought I'd check. Robert Moxley, Columbia River Advisor, avid recreational angler. So I'd like to start out with the summer Chinook. As the season progresses, it's a robust prediction this year. Those are awesome fish. If you like to fish and you like to eat fish, I think they're one of the best, if not the best. So as the season progresses, and if it doesn't look like we're going to use our quota below Bonneville, I would encourage the staff to look at some non-select opportunity. I don't care if it's 1 per year, but I'd like to maximize the quota that we're given, that we bought into with the tags and licenses. For several reasons. Water temperature reaching 70 degrees that time of year in late July. They're not ESA listed, and they're robust. The population, I mean, the return we're having this year is phenomenal. Ocean Sport gets to keep them. Tribes get to keep them. Commercials are allowed to keep them if they were allowed to fish. So, I mean, why the discrepancy? Even the tribes, some of the tribes don't really like it that we're throwing all these fish back in the warm water when they're not, there's no ESC listed and there's no reason to. So as the season progresses on the summer Chinook, I would like staff to look at maybe that possibility. As far as fall Chinook, the options are, they're tough. I get it. A lot went down last year. We can't have that happen again. So option 3, from Buoy 10 to Puget would be my number 1 choice. So we can keep some non-select in the bag, because once we lose something, it seems like it's gone forever. And retention is important to a lot of people. And you got to remember what substock's in there at that time. It's mostly upriver brights. So not a lot of toolies running around, or LRH constraining stocks. As far as Puget to Lewis, option 1. And I do think there's going to be a shift in effort from Buoy 10 to Puget Island to Lewis River, and I'm surprised you didn't do anything with that in regards to the Mark Select. There's a good possibility that that shuts the whole river down. I mean, I think it's going to be honest with you, as far as tule consumption. And then the Lewis Warrior to Bonneville, I'd go with option 1. And then hopefully in season allows, you know, a little bit more opportunity. The last comment I'd like to make, follow up with a question. I see reduced effort at the buoy 10 fishery, you know, and I think that's kind of the narrative going forward with what we're dealing with. Not as many people are going to want to fish that Mark Select, and it's going to be restrictive. So with that, we're going to actually use less coho impacts. And again, that's the only place we really catch them. So if there was any way the staff could consider maybe a non-select coho retention opportunity in zone 4 and 5, maybe 1 per year per angler, that would mean a lot to some of us that we're able to catch them. We don't catch very many. The commercials, which I agree with, are allowed to have a non-select coho fishery in zone 4 and 5. And I've asked why, and staff's told me we do not expect much in the catch. Well, the same exact thing can be said for sports. So why the bias? Why the discrepancy? Why can't we be inclusive? I just don't understand why the staff hasn't looked at that opportunity. I mean, I'd like to take home a fish too if it was, you know, within impacts and management opportunity. So anyway, that's my comments, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to move back into the room. Go ahead.
My name is Jim Fowler. I'm an Oregon licensed fishing guide. I also own the bait shop, Big Game Fishing, the former Sturgeon Paul's at the top of the boat ramp in Hammond. And I have a wholesale fish dealer's license, so I deal a little bit with the commercial guys. The options here for the river this year are tough. I've heard everything you've said about the break, and it's not a shutdown. I can tell you in option 5 and option 3, when we close that Chinook retention on August 25th or whatever, that's the end of the buoy 10 fishery pretty much. 90% of effort is going to leave. They're gone. I just talked to the owner of the South Jetty Bar, Andy Nicholson, about this the other day in Hammond. He said, how long is it going to go? Because when the Chinook guys leave, it's done. And especially if they can just drive up to that brand new facility at Westport and kill any Chinook 40 minutes from town, we're going to have a 90% effort shift from buoy 10 to that West Puget Island to Warrior Rock area. You guys, it's coming. Last year, guys that were camped in my yard on August 25th were fishing at Cascade Locks on like August 28th or something. As soon as it closed, they were up there. And they're texting me pictures going, man, we can't believe how good this is. Blah, blah, blah. Well, you guys, the sport fleet is too agile and we're too efficient. They are going to go up there, they're going to figure it out, and they're going to hammer fish. So the thing that makes the most sense in my mind is if we're going to use Mark Select as a tool, and we were told in 2021 that that was the plan, 10 days was going to fix this, that didn't work. Last year it was 24 days, that didn't work. Now we're doing boundaries and different days. Why can't we just do Mark Select, buoy 10 to Warrior Rock from August 1st to Labor Day and monitor that, and in season say, hey, maybe we do get to August 27th and you say, hey, you know what? We can do some any Chinook Labor Day weekend for West Puget Island to Warrior. You know, we can't do it for buoy 10, or maybe we can do it for the whole area, but set it up that way to where otherwise you're going to have zone jumping again. People aren't going to plan to come to buoy 10 late in August because, well, nobody wants to fish coho between buoy 20 and buoy 10 on those tides when it's not going to be great. The other issue you have there is Social Security Beach basically starts for the bank guys at the west end at buoy 20. They don't fish west of 20, so you're basically closing Social Security Beach to those bank guys if buoy 20 is your deadline there. And then the other thing I'm looking at is between option 3 and 5, as Moxley said, I think we're going to see a lot lower effort at Buoy 10. Effort was never that busy last year. We had like one weekend where the launch line at the ramp went out to the stop sign. Other than that, most of August, you could just pull up and launch. People were getting ready for that any Chinook thing. I just think that the way this is modeled here, I think if you do like option 3 or 5 for Buoy 10, and then you go option 1 for West Puget to Warrior, we are in the same boat as last year. There will be a closure. It'll be ugly, and people are going to come unhinged. I had people coming in my shop after the closure asking where they could fish because they booked Airbnbs and everything else and brought their kids to the coast because we sold them on the idea for years that coho would always be open and there's this great coho opportunity. And now people are telling me we're never coming back. We can't keep a fishery open. We're not coming back. So I understand there's a lot of challenges. I understand we're trying to juggle 15 chainsaws and a couple flaming swords here, but we got to simplify this. These mixed in midday weird closures with weird closure zones, that's going to drive people away. It's going to flat out drive them away. So if we can do anything to simplify it and make it more square for just, these are tules. Why are we going to kill tules between West Puget Island and Warrior Rock when they're part of the constraining stock? I don't get that. That makes no sense to me. So if we can simplify that whole area and hopefully make it a better overall opportunity, that's what I would hope we could do. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we'll go online. We got Bob Rees. Go ahead, Bob.
Hey, folks, you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Bob Rees, Northwest Guides and Anglers Association, Columbia River Rec Advisor, member NSIA. Thanks again, as everybody's mentioned, for the detailed work you guys have gone through. We too would advocate for alternative 5, I guess, if that's the appropriate term. We're in Northwest Oregon. We're down to one reliable fishery, that's Buoy 10, and it's no longer reliable. There's not going to be a Tillamook Bay fall fishery for harvest for wild fall Chinook. Last year's coho fishery, despite the closures, was also very unproductive. So, this is the fishery everybody books for now. It's after 26 years of guiding, this is the one I'm down to. No sturgeon retention this year. These dates are now booked out 11 or 12 months in advance. The closure that's being proposed here, I'm already going to have to tell people it might not happen. I don't know. Maybe there'll be an ocean alternative. I don't know, but there's ocean weather to deal with. So it's just become really challenging for us. And, to see options of non-mark select on the table for a grand total of 9 or 14 or 10 days or whatever that just spells bankruptcy for part-time guides that are going to be more part-time guides than ever before. So, we have to advocate for alternative 5. A lot of folks have mentioned why close it all if we can stay on track with non-mark select. I have to assume that staff has looked at that option and just did not find it feasible. I understand the need for precautionary measures given the challenges of previous years for managing this fishery. But if there's a way to go have consistency without compromising recovery, that would be understandable. I haven't heard staff say that there's a real reason that we have that 5-day break there between non-mark select options and in option 5. So I'd love to hear some clarification on that. But as I've heard today, it sounds like most folks are interested in looking at alternative 5 for the Buoy 10 fishery, and that's what we would support as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. All right. So come back in the room. Go ahead.
Yes. Jim Bridwell, Columbia River Recreational Advisor.
I'd echo a lot of the comments that have been made today. Thanks for putting together these options and trying to find a creative way to solve this thing. It's, we're fishing on the most constrained stock in the river, and it just is starting later, coming up with different models. I applaud your efforts on that type of thing. I would support option 3, probably for a little bit different reason than maybe was stated. I think it gives staff an extra couple, 2 or 3 days to look at where we're at. You look at last year, not only did we shut down buoy 10, but we shut down everything upriver from there, and that just doesn't feel right. And this is coming from a person who spends this whole time fishing buoy 10. So to me, those days would allow us to ensure those folks upriver that we're going to have a fishery up there as well. That didn't necessarily happen last year until we had that last little bit there at the end up there by Bonneville. So 3 would do that. You also got the herb handle that was talked about. You're going to give up 2 days to allow to catch a fish that, is probably the best run in the whole river. You're not handling fish, sorting fish to try and find a hatchery, tule. It makes a lot of sense for me for 3 versus 5. I do disagree with some of the comments about people leaving. If they have a chance to catch an herb, they're probably going to make a trip down to buoy 10. And I think that's true. I did want to clarify a comment that I think Jeff Whistler made earlier about when the coho or when the Chinook are down, the coho are down. That does not include 9-4 on, correct? So when you've got that 3 coho going, you can fish for coho and don't have to be able to catch a Chinook. Correct. Yeah. Okay. I thought he said that it went. Yeah. Okay. Great. I didn't hear the August part. Other areas, the Lewis, Puget Island to Lewis, option 1 would be what I'd recommend, and then Lewis to Bonneville, option 1 as well. So again, thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you, Jim. So before I jump to Harry, because we don't have anyone else on the list virtually, I do want to check in on the phone lines because we haven't asked folks to come off mute except the original piece. So just do a quick check, *6 to come off mute if you've not had an ability to jump in yet and provide comments. We just want to provide the phone, folks calling on the phone, the opportunity. Just state your name. Okay, we'll do another check in a bit. We did get one?
But I don't know which one.
Okay, we'll come back in a minute. So Harry, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. Harry Barber, Columbia River Advisor, member of CCA, live in Washougal. Let me start with the summer Chinook, please. Summer Chinook, we didn't have an opportunity to even fish summer Chinook until about 2000. Stocks would not allow it. I strongly support mark selective fishing, and it is a conservation theme. Summer Chinook spawn in the Similkameen and a number of rivers way over on the east side. And those rivers, most of those rivers are under-escaped with wild fish. They're also over-escaped with hatchery fish. So mark selective is the only tool that really helps on the spawning beds. I support a 1 Chinook limit, not 2. It gives us, I can't remember the numbers from this morning, but another 7 or 8 or 10 days more. So to Tucker's point, it's more opportunity. And going to sockeye, 2 fish bag limit, where a sockeye can be part of your salmon limit, so you can have one sockeye, 1 Chinook. I support that. Again, I live in Washougal, fished out of Washougal for 50 years. And we were really at the end of the line last year. I mean, we had a very, very brief season above Reed Island, where if you launch at Camas or Sundial, you're running at least 3 miles to where you can even fish. And so fishing was decent, but it was very short because of what happened to buoy 10. So I'm not gonna comment on a favorite option for buoy 10, other than those big numbers are a little scary to me. When you're looking 28, 29,000 fish, I mean, if you hit your mark, you're okay. If you go over 10%, we probably have a problem. In terms of the Lewis to Bonneville, I favor option 2 for a number of reasons. Option 2 has 46 days, just like option 1. But fishing is generally very poor, and I've done it for many, many years, until about the 7th or 8th of September above I-5. Water's too warm, you get a lousy bite. And so with option 2, you've got a non-marked selective 8-1. There's really no fishing until later on. And you get 35 days, and then September 8th to the 30th on a 3-day rolling closure or opener, you get some decent fishing. And so I strongly favor option 2. Steelhead, just one quick comment on steelhead. Maybe I'm too old, but I don't like the idea of night fishing. I mean, those rivers that were mentioned all have very liberal seasons. They're open, I think, every day. And so there's plenty of time to fish, and I don't think you have to fish at night. And I have some good friends who are in enforcement, and lots of the nefarious activities take place at night. So I guess I'm opposed to night steelhead fishing. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. I do believe Washington State, we're closed at night in the tributaries. Looking, Matt, Steelhead is closed at night in the tributaries, correct? We made a rule change on that. All right, we're going to come on and respond and just clarify that
It
question.
is definitely closed at night.
Yeah, mistaken. I was looking at the handout today that said they're opening the Lewis, the Cowlitz, and the Kalama at night.
Yeah, so we'll clarify that part, but the main stem is closed at night. We made some changes a few years ago.
Just about the trips.
Hi, this is Bryce Glasser, Region 5 Fish Program Manager. I need to double check the regulation pamphlet for all of the exact areas in the Cowlitz and Lewis, but there are night fishing opportunities in both of those rivers. And so this would eliminate that potential closure in those lower reaches to have the regulations mimic or match the adjacent areas upstream, kind of, which is our typical permanent rule that we would have in those zones. If that helps clarify.
So night fishing is allowed upstream?
It is.
I was mistaken. I guess I'm opposed to that too.
Thanks.
Well, good to clarify that question because I was uncertain of the status, but thanks for your comments on that. That's helpful. All right, so before we jump to you, okay, we're gonna check the online crew there. I saw that. I want to check in again with David Moskowitz. I don't know if you're on, but just gonna check in because your hand did go up earlier. Okay, I think we saw Liz's hand go up. Just checking.
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead, Liz, and then we'll come back to the room after you.
Oh, all right. Thank you very much. You know, as you've heard earlier, moving to Mark Select last year was pretty remarkable. It was an enormous change, and it was fairly well received, and it performed as you thought it would. And so, as others have stated, since late last year, we've been in conversations with both state agencies and with many of the stakeholders who are interested in moving to a different way of fishing, a way of fishing that provided more stability, a way of fishing that helps solve a problem we have with Thule hatchery fish on the spawning beds. And so I got to admit to having been disappointed and somewhat surprised that option 5 had a start-stop in it, especially given that the bulk of the impacts remained after the Mark Select fishery ended in late August last year. So it's hard to contemplate that there isn't enough impacts to run a marked select fishery all the way through August and into Labor Day. Would like to see the numbers on that. And I'm sorry if I missed the discussion on it. I had to attend a state hearing. So the other thing I would say is in the Middle River, as folks have also pointed out, it can get pretty explosive there as well. And I think you might consider looking at a marked select fishery there as well. It'll help provide consistency. People won't jump around from one zone to the other, and might provide more fishing opportunity in that section of the river. And so as I looked at this overly complicated document that came out, I just want to say let's try something new. Let's try something simple. It's clean. It's easy. And I understand that it's easier on staff to do a start-stop, but your staff has done an excellent job doing in-season management for many, many, many years, and I don't have any doubt that they could continue to monitor the fisheries and then maybe listen to the fish. There might be opportunity to go full retention at some time in the season, but not at a predicted date that people book hotels for, because I think that's what happened last year, is that folks probably pounded down to the Buoy 10 area once full retention opened. So again, I'd ask you to look at this. I hope this is not the last word, the document that we're looking at today, and that you'll consider a full marked select fishery in both Buoy 10 and up to Warrior Rock, and until and unless the fish say that we can have a few more impacts for full retention. And thank you for the opportunity. And I really appreciate the hybrid approach to the meetings. You're doing a great job.
Thank you for your comments, Liz. Appreciate it. Coming back to the room, we've got Cameron, so go ahead.
Yeah, Cameron Black, Washington State Guide Association. Appreciate your guys' effort after last year, of course. We're definitely in this position where we need to be ultra conservative, but looking at what was forecasted for LRH last year, and seeing that this year is a fairly similar number, we assumed that the impacts allocated for the hatchery only season was less than half of what the overall Buoy 10 allocation was. And we got 24 days out of that. So in looking at number 5, we're assuming that we're going to chew up the other half of that in 5 days versus what we did in the 24 days, knowing that part of the season, hopefully one low pressure comes into the fishery like kind of normal and kind of wipes them out of that lower river area. But even all the way into September, I don't see how basically even under a very, very conservative approach, which we do appreciate because ultimately like we'd rather see like an under promise or over deliver. I don't see how the other 50% goes to only for 5 days of fishing. I want to see, just like Liz, Jesse, everybody's been kind of reiterating, we want to see that fishery go through. One of the big points of not having this giant effort shift upriver, just in discussions here in the back room and shooting this text out and talking with guys last night, I can tell you from a lot of experience, talking to a lot of members, August 26th, we're gone. And now we're putting way more weight in a non-marked select area, whether that's above Woodland or whether that is above Longview if you guys decide to go hatchery only there. So I really strongly recommend having both those areas, especially in that time of year, because like I said, one low pressure comes in somewhere in that second, third week of August, and a lot of those fish will move, unlike what happened last year. I don't see how we can accrue enough catch and enough impacts, even running this thing all the way for hatchery only, where you guys won't have time to stop it or slow it down. I know I think if I remember right, we accrue impacts on those LRH fish like 7 times faster when we're doing a non-marked select fishery than if we're doing a marked select fishery. So I don't see how even having, I don't see how you guys would not have time to react, so where we wouldn't be chewing up some of the upriver stuff upriver. We had a discussion last week, and we kind of opened up a Columbia River chapter within our associations, and we kind of had a very long discussion with a lot of guys, because there are some interests out there that would like to see the fisheries just be non-marked select, but ultimately we decided, and we kind of gave the opportunity for people to say that we really do appreciate having that Mark Select fishery. It gives just tons of time, tons of opportunity, and tons of access for a lot of like people that are not going to be able to participate in the fisheries if we don't have those days open. So we do appreciate the very heavy Mark Select approach that we have coming, that you guys have planned for us this year. So we would advocate for option number 5, but with consideration that we would go for the full month of August. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. All right, just gonna check to see if there's anyone else who has not provided comments or comments yet. We want to make sure everyone has had at least one opportunity. Right. All right, so we'll just circle back. We do have Larry provide comments earlier, but his hand's back up, and we've got time, so we'll go ahead and take the comment. So Larry, go ahead.
Hi, this is Larry Lavoie. I just had one clarification question on the footnote 3 regarding the buoy 20 line. Now, is that the way the footnote, is it all of Clatsop Spit and then the river downstream of the buoy 20 line? And what would be is it a north-south run through buoy 20, or what would be the north boundary of that? What would be the Washington side boundary on that line?
Yeah, that's a good question, Larry. We're still working on that concept for the buoy 20 line, but we thought that it would include all of Social Security Beach, or Clatsop Spit as it's known, and the North Jetty as well. And like we said, that's still a concept as far as whether it went over to one of the wing dams on Sand Island off Port of Chinook, or, you know, there's very possibly some other buoys that could be involved, but we're still working on that part.
Okay, thank you.
All right, guess I'll do a last call. Check to see if there's anyone else. All right, so I have Robert Moxley, and I swear this is really the last call, last chance, shutting it down. All right, Robert, you're the last one.
All right, thanks for the opportunity. Again, Robert Moxley, Columbia River Advisory. I'll keep this short. I just wanted to reiterate, I understand why buoy 10 is where it's at. I unfortunately have to agree with the Mark Select aspect. I just want staff to recognize the importance of retention with some of these anglers. It seems like the last 15 years, it's just more and more days on the water. That seems to be what the goal and narrative is. I fish a lot of people that only get to fish 2 days a year, and it is very important for them to be able to take home a fish. It means a lot. So just make sure the staff considers that it's not just about the days on the water. It's also about quality retention opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. So, you sure nobody else wants to come up? Don't be shy. You know, we've still got another hour of time.
Traffic only gets worse, though.
Traffic gets better. Don't listen to him. You'll be fine.
It's clear going north.
Tucker, Ryan, I can keep talking.
Sorry. For anybody other than Robert Moxley, looking to
I got lots to say. Just kidding you.
So, I guess heard a lot of really good input today. Lots of thoughts that we're gonna have to think about. I think we have heard a lot of support for mark selective fisheries. I have heard, that folks would prefer not to have the sort of coho only time in between sort of late August and Labor Day weekend. We in Oregon are dealing with some guidance that, we always try to accomplish, not always able to. I think one of the things, I guess, coming back around, that's part of my narrative thread here, right, is that they did check it up, and the mark rate during those sort of days last year was about 75%, which means, probably would have run out of tulies before Labor Day, even if we'd stayed at hatchery only. I mean, that's me doing mental math in my head, so take that with about 15,000 grains of salt. Assuming effort had been the same, it might not have been, but that was, it was, there were a lot of tulies harvested during that day. I think we're gonna have to huddle up and talk and think amongst the states and staff and think about what we've heard today. And that's sort of where we're at. I would like to leave here telling you what I think our one single approach is. I think our main approach is going to be probably mark selective fisheries. I think we heard pretty clearly through the survey that people really value predictability. I have lots of things to think about yet. I guess I should throw it open to other staff, Charlene, Ryan, Jeff.
I'll go last. So Charlene, any thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And I agree with Tucker. I mean, there's been a lot of good feedback today. I was just going to highlight maybe a few of the things that I think I heard. I heard some suggestions for, looking at the bridge as opposed to the buoy 20 line. I heard lots of support for option 5, but I also heard some comments, in support of non-mark selective opportunities when they're available. And that, those things make sense to me. So it sounds like, we as staff have some work to do, but I really do appreciate folks, chiming in and providing feedback for us to consider. It is really helpful for us. And I also appreciate, I think this was a good discussion today that highlighted some of the things folks didn't like about the 2022, season, but I think it, was good context to frame up some of the things for people today. So thanks very much.
Yes.
Thanks,
Yes.
Charlene. Sorry, we're going to try to.
They don't want that.
Individual.
Because if it's closed in between, they're like, everyone's just gonna go up.
Whoever's talking
all
right
these
now,
businesses here are gonna suffer, and no one's gonna.
Find him. Got him. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Nick did.
All right, Jeff. All right, Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. I just wanted to say I really appreciate all the feedback we heard from folks today and the participation we had. I think, we've had 70, 80 plus people online that I can see, and it looks like a good number of folks in the room here too. So really appreciate the engagement. You all have given us some things to think about here. This is exactly what we were looking for, was this type of feedback. So we'll take this and we'll use that. And as we work on our, final shaping of these seasons. And again, really appreciate the thoughts, obviously a variety of opinions, and those are the types of things we get to deal with, right? Because everyone's got a little different take on it, and we have to try to, merge all that together to be something, to find something that's meaningful and also does, meet all of our conservation and sharing objectives as well. So it's not an easy task at all, but I hope folks have seen that we've taken a vastly different approach to this once again this year, with the objective of providing some potential for stability in the season structures and minimizing the risk of those in-season actions that are just completely disruptive and not really anything we want to ever try to do. So yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. And then I'll conclude with really appreciate everyone's time and also their flexibility to adjust to today's modified time we could get together, given unforeseen circumstances that we had to adjust last week's planned meeting to this week. So apologize if that happened, but it just happens. Life happens. Really appreciate everyone making the time. Join us, whether you're working while you're listening in virtually like some of us, or you're here in person. Really appreciate that. We definitely really appreciate all the thoughts and interest in trying to provide a really good fishery this fall, understanding our objective is to avoid a repeat of last year. We've had several years in a row of a similar circumstance. That is our number one objective: avoid the closure. Can't eliminate the risk, but we're going to reduce it to the extent that makes sense, whether that's a pause to assess a fishery or other mechanisms. But we're, mark selective on the front end definitely seems to be what was considered option 5 and 3 were the more common ones, 5 most, but so modified. A few differences of opinion with regards to what you do around Labor Day and whether to pause or not. Those are some of the outstanding issues. Didn't hear a huge support of coho when we're closed. If there is a pause, we were hoping to get more input, but there was some. But we're definitely take that to heart. And then definitely appreciate the thoughts that you move up river for inputs. Those are what we needed to hear. And all the other fishery inputs in between all of that in the fall, including summer and steelhead. Really do. Definitely took notes. We're going to get together and see what we come up with and avoid, if we can, and all possibilities, unneeded or the closure if we can, but there's no guarantee. But that's our number one objective approach.
Right. That's really the number one thing for me, that emergency unplanned closure in that last part of August and early September. And I really have a pretty, I can already feel my nightmares starting, if we set a mark select fishery and tell people it's going to get through Labor Day and then, have to pull the plug on August 29. So that sort of thing, something that we're going to have to think about, because we definitely heard, I think, not support for just coho only fisheries during that last week of August. So, yeah, thank you all. I really appreciate. Yeah, this is I think the best turnout I've seen in one of these for quite some while, and I appreciate folks. Means people care, and they should. These are important. Important fisheries, important resources. These fall Chinook fisheries, whether they're recreational, commercial, contribute greatly to the region, economically, culturally, socially, I think environmentally too. So much appreciated. Thank you all.
Okay. And with that, if you have more thoughts, we have the online commenting portal. Put your thoughts in there again. Vote as many times. It's not a vote. Just throw it in there. We'll read it. We'll share it with Oregon staff. And I think with that, we are good and ahead of schedule. And some people might beat traffic. Thank you all.
Thank you.
The
David Moss is here.
Oh, David, we kind of just finished.
Oh, well. Write an email.
You already left?
Yeah.
Looks like you guys are, I thought it was going till 5 o'clock.
I know there was a bill. Specific area.
Tucker, Ryan, you there? Hello.